Silent battlefields, where historic photos whisper the untold stories of war and human memory. In May 1945, in Germany, the Allies were shocked by the horrific scene when they opened the train cars carrying prisoners from the concentration camps. Inside, many emaciated bodies, wrapped in thin blankets, lay motionless after a deadly journey, probably on their way to Ludwigslust. The American soldiers stood silently, witnessing with their own eyes the grisly evidence of Nazi crimes. The image became an undeniable testament to the terrible brutality of the Holocaust. At Belsen concentration camp in 1945, after its liberation by the Allies, German civilians were forced to witness and participate in the cleanup of the horrific atrocities. Under gunfire and bayonet watch, they collected the emaciated bodies of prisoners, leaving them scattered across the campgrounds. Their faces, frightened and terrified, reflected the stark reality they had previously tried to ignore. The scene became a painful reminder of silence in the face of atrocities. During the Leipzig massacre, a political prisoner collapsed against a barbed wire fence, his body charred and bleeding after being shot in the head. He and hundreds of Poles, French, Russians, and Czechs were imprisoned in Stalag Tekla, where the SS doused the camp with flammable liquid and set it on fire with bazookas. As the flames raged, anyone who tried to escape was machine-gunned down. 350 innocent lives were burned and slaughtered in that horrific nightmare. In the Belsen concentration camp, 31-year-old Margit Schwartz, a Jew from Budapest, was a pale shadow of life. Her body was in pain, so thin that it was skin and bones. Her mind was hazy and broken. Even though she was almost insane and had to be fed and turned over by nurses, she still had an extraordinary moment. She struggled to stand up from her bed, her trembling hands holding on to the iron frame, recreating almost exactly the appearance of an old photograph, the last meaningful memento in her fragmented memory. A victim of the 1945 atomic bomb explosion in Japan has horrific burns in the shape of a nuclear burn pattern. The wounds trace the exact shadow of the kimono the victim was wearing at the moment of terror. The intense heat and radiation from the explosion imprinted the fabric's pattern onto his body, turning his skin into a painful replica of his clothes. The scene is both horrifying and haunting, revealing the inhumanity of nuclear weapons. During the Lüneburg war crimes trial, which exposed the horrors of the Belsen concentration camp, Major General von Lochow, a former German Wehrmacht officer, was allowed to attend. In the photo, he appears without a hat, standing on the left, answering reporters. In front of the camera, the general insisted that he and many other German generals had absolutely no knowledge of the existence of Belsen and other gruesome concentration camps. In a rare photograph taken at Buchenwald concentration camp, Claire Booth Luce, a famous American politician and diplomat, is seen visiting the prison hospital. Here, she directly talked to Nazi prisoners suffering from tuberculosis, who were part of the cruel death machine. In the gloomy scene, the dialogue was not only humane, but also a testament to the confrontation with the terrible crimes of the fascist regime. In June 1940, during the agonizing days of the Battle of Dunkirk, soldiers of the British Expeditionary Force crammed onto lifeboats to return home. They were part of the historic evacuation operation Dynamo, which freed hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk, surrounded by German bombs and bullets. The image, etched with both despair and hope, marked one of the defining moments of World War II. In June 1940, on their return journey from Dunkirk, British Expeditionary Force soldiers rested on the deck of a Royal Navy rescue ship. They had just escaped the smoky beaches where tens of thousands of Allied soldiers were trapped by German forces. Operation Dynamo had given them a chance to survive, and their brief respite on deck became a symbol of hope and courage in the midst of war. On August 6, 1940, photographer J.C.A. Redhead, 1886 to 1954, took a rare Kodachrome color photograph of Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, 1983 to 1945, during World War II. Although he retired in 1939, he returned to command the British Navy, notably as an architect of the Dunkirk evacuation in 1940, and then as naval commander during the Normandy landings on D-Day, June 6, 1944. Kodachrome, Kodak's first advanced color film technology, was extremely scarce during the war, but Redhead had access to it through his leadership position at Kodak UK. Around 1946, renowned photographer Richard Peterson captured a haunting moment on a small village road near Dresden, Germany. In the photo, two World War II veterans who had lost both legs were slowly moving on old wooden crutches. Over one of their shoulders was a bulky backpack, which appeared to be full of potatoes, a precious food during the post-war famine. The photo clearly depicts the physical pain and harshness of life after the war. On September 1, 1939, in the free city of Danzig, Poland, German police and customs officers recreated the dismantling of the Polish border checkpoint at Sopot. This iconic image marked the beginning of the Nazi invasion of Poland and the beginning of World War II. What seemed like a small border gate dismantling became a signal of the global tragedy that was about to unfold. Around September 18, 1944, in the newly liberated Belgian town of Aalst, a soldier of the Irish Guard smiled as he accepted a cigar from a local resident. In the jubilant atmosphere after long days of occupation, the small gift became a symbol of gratitude and joy of reunion. This simple yet emotional image depicts the warm military-civilian relationship amid the flames of World War II. In April 1942, at Fort Riley, Kansas, an American soldier was riding a motorcycle messenger for his platoon of motorized cavalry reconnaissance units. Through the lens of photographer Jack Delano of the United States Office of War Information, the image exuded pride and determination. The dusty motorcycle, neat uniform and focused eyes portrayed the spirit of readiness to serve the fatherland during the fierce period of World War II. In the midst of the fierce battle at the Battle of Peleliu, which lasted from September to November 1944, the U.S. Marines took a rare break after clearing the battlefield. They sat on the hot ground, their backs covered in sweat, quietly lighting cigarettes to dispel their fatigue. The image not only depicts resilience but also shows the human moment in the midst of the brutal storm of war. On April 12, 1945, in the Merkers salt mine in Germany, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, and General Omar N. Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, carefully examined a suitcase filled with precious silver. This was part of the huge booty hidden by the Nazis. That moment clearly reflected the brutality of war and the secrets that the Allies gradually discovered. In March 1945, in the midst of the fierce Battle of Iwo Jima, a Boeing B-29 heavy bomber was forced to make an emergency landing on a runway filled with smoke and flames. Immediately after touching down, the giant plane burst into flames, turning into a fireball in the middle of the battlefield. The image was both tragic and heroic, reflecting the extreme harshness of war and the sacrifices that air crews had to face in each mission. On January 29, 1945, in Binalonan, Pangasinan, Luzon, American soldiers, in conjunction with Filipino resistance forces, inspected the scene after a fierce battle. Before them were two Japanese Hago light tanks that had been shot down, lying motionless in the dust of the battlefield. Inside, the Japanese crew members had died, leaving a clear evidence of the Japanese Army's defeat in the campaign to liberate the Philippines. In May 1945, a squadron of U.S. Air Force B-29 strategic bombers streaked across the skies of Japan. carrying out a devastating mission against the port city of Yokohama. Incendiary bombs were dropped, showering densely populated neighborhoods with crimson flames, turning them into vast seas of fire. The raid had a devastating impact, destroying much of the infrastructure and inflicting heavy casualties on Japanese civilians. A USF B-25B Mitchell medium bomber, one of 16 aircraft participating in the Doolittle raid, takes off from the deck of USS Hornet to conduct an airstrike on the Japanese home islands, April 18, 1942. Around 1945, a Douglas A-20 Havoc light bomber of the United States Army Air Force, USAAF, was captured in majestic moments in the sky. With its compact yet powerful design, the A-20 Havoc was a formidable weapon in ground attack and nighttime bombing campaigns. This aircraft played an important role in supporting infantry, destroying strategic targets, and asserting American air power at the end of World War II. In April 1942, in the waters of the North Pacific, Navy Lieutenant Mark A. Mitcher, captain of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, was captured in history holding important orders. He posed for a photograph with Lieutenant Commander James Doolittle and his crew, who were about to embark on a daring air raid on Japanese territory. The image marked the brave spirit that opened the famous Doolittle raid. On March 15, 1939, the heavy footsteps of the German army echoed through the cobblestone streets of Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia. Long lines of soldiers in their distinctive gray uniforms and steel helmets marched in neat rows, rifles slung over their shoulders, into the city center, as the locals watched in bewilderment and helplessness. The invasion marked the end of Czechoslovak independence, as the small country was quickly swallowed up by the massive Nazi war machine. The image of the army marching into Prague became a haunting testament to Hitler's unstoppable expansion in the early years of World War II. In February 1942, in Singapore, Britain's impregnable citadel in the Far East, British, Australian, and Indian soldiers were forced to surrender to the Japanese army after days of fierce fighting. In their mud-stained uniforms, they silently bowed their heads before the enemy's guns. This event marked the most humiliating defeat in British military history, with more than 80,000 soldiers taken prisoner, and paved the way for Japan to control all of Southeast Asia at the height of World War II. In the final days of World War II, Hitler desperately relied on the fledgling youth force from the Hitler Youth, turning them into reluctant soldiers on the bloody battlefield. In the photo, he appears with a cold gaze, gently touching the face of a boy who had just been awarded a medal, as if to instill blind faith in them. These young faces, not yet 20 years old, were caught up in the vortex of propaganda, becoming human shields for a regime about to collapse. This is a tragic testament to the exploitation of youth in the frenzy of war. In the dimly lit train station, a sailor hurriedly gave his lover a passionate farewell kiss before the train rolled away. The girl stood on tiptoe, hugging him tightly through the train window, as if holding on to the last bit of warmth in the short moment. All around, silent eyes watched, filled with sympathy. The photo captured not only a farewell kiss, but also a symbol of love, sacrifice, and the pain of separation in war, where every encounter could be the last. The introduction of the American gas mask in combat. To protect troops from chemical attacks, the United States issued gas masks widely. Training ensured that soldiers could quickly put on masks when attacked. This protective device saved many lives in the mustard gas environment. Masks became an essential part of combat gear. Their use marked a new era in chemical warfare defense. Marta Lobelt, the operator, Gertrude Reinhold, Irene Haschke, and Anneliese Coleman, shortly after their arrest in Bergen-Belsen, May 2, 1945. The first three were dressed in Nazi uniforms, while Coleman wore an ill-fitting male uniform, because when she was arrested, she was wearing a prisoner's uniform to disguise herself as a Jewish woman. May 2nd, 1945. Before the outbreak of World War II, there were several international laws prohibiting the mistreatment of prisoners of war, POWs. However, these laws were often bent or completely ignored as the war continued. Here, Sikh prisoners awaited their untimely deaths at the hands of their Japanese captors. While all participating nations violated the rules to some extent regarding the treatment of POWs, most historians agree that the Japanese were the worst offenders. Even in history's darkest hours, there were glimmers of kindness and humanity. And though many prisoners and casualties of war were brutally treated or left for dead, some were given a rare second chance at the hands of the enemy. Such luck befell this newborn baby, carried to safety by an American soldier after the Battle of Saipan. Perhaps the most famous event of World War II, the Normandy landings, dubbed Operation Overlord and carried out by the Allies, was the largest amphibious assault in history, taking place on the northern coast of France on June 6, 1944. The landings, while ultimately successful, came at the cost of more than 209,000 Allied casualties. Many soldiers died before reaching the beaches. Of course, the vast majority of deaths in World War II occurred on the battlefield or in concentration camps, but there were other ways to die as well. As the war began to draw to an inevitable end, and it became clear that the Allies would win, many German officials, such as Ernst Lissow, chose suicide rather than face almost certain execution by the Allies for their war crimes. With seemingly endless bombing campaigns reducing cities to rubble, those fortunate enough not to see combat live in constant fear of death. Pictured above are British schoolchildren taking part in an air raid drill. Neither the wooden desks nor the way they position their hands would offer much protection if hit by a German bomb. While most schoolchildren cowered under their desks during air raids, adults who were out during a terrorist attack often had to run to the nearest tube station to minimize their risk of death. Like these Londoners during a German air raid. While the tube offered a relatively high level of protection, those who took shelter there could still be confined to their new tube homes for days, with bombs occasionally penetrating shallower parts of the station. Due to the indiscriminate and sustained nature of much of the bombing during World War II, even those who tried their best to find shelter at the beginning of a raid often failed to act quickly enough. Such was the case with the passengers on this London bus. At the Battle of Midway, Japan's dominance in the Pacific was finally called into question. From June 3rd to 7th, 1942, just 6 months after Japan devastated the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor, the United States inflicted a decisive and devastating blow on Japan in the Pacific, destroying 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, a heavy cruiser, and 248 aircraft in the process. Some 3,057 Japanese soldiers died in the campaign, compared to just 307 Americans. While many soldiers in the war sought the glory of aerial combat rather than the harsh realities of ground combat, pilots were also forced to endure countless horrors in the skies. Mechanical failures leading to engine failure were not uncommon, and those lucky enough to avoid being shot down in a skirmish were also vulnerable to mid-air collisions, as was the case with this unfortunate pilot. For much of the war, the Germans had absolute air dominance. The mighty and fearsome Luftwaffe, commanded by Hermann Göring, was the largest and most powerful air force in World War II. They had devastated London during the Battle of Britain. Here, however, the British got at least a small measure of revenge, bombing German-held Abbeville airfield in France. Terror came in all forms during World War II, and sometimes even being with your comrades was frightening. Here, a Russian soldier hopes that the ground around his trench will not be better occupied by a massive Russian T-34 tank during the Battle of Kursk, fought between German and Soviet forces in July and August 1943. War is hell. It can turn good, kind people into savage monsters, capable of untold destruction, torture, and inhumanity. Yet sometimes humanity wins out, as in the case of this German soldier who chose to give part of his rations to a starving Russian prisoner of war and her daughter. Although it looked as if Georges Blind, the man facing a barrage of German rifles in this photograph, was about to be executed, it was all a lie. The Germans were merely trying to extract information from Blind, a member of the French resistance. When Blind refused to reveal their intentions, the guns were lowered, and he was instead sent to a concentration camp, where he died almost immediately. In this iconic photograph, British prisoner of war Horace Greeley stares down one of the Nazi Party's leading figures, Heinrich Himmler. Here, Himmler is touring one of the many active German prisoner of war camps. He was the leader of the Nazis' notorious SS and the chief overseer of the concentration camps that systematically murdered millions of people. In the Allied effort to liberate the Pacific from Japanese control, an island-hopping strategy was employed, which saw the Allies systematically gain control of several key Japanese-held islands. One of these was Okinawa. Although the Allies ultimately won, the victory was difficult, and Japan's determination to fight to the end in this conflict was one of the reasons why the atomic bomb was ultimately deemed necessary.